What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota and Danny Abdel-Jabbar, and this is episode number 200, my friend.
Woo! I'm so fucking pumped. So pumped, dude. I hope you read all the breaking news because the information that we got is about to change everything.
So what, you just want to jump right into it and skip the banter? That
Absolutely.
The 2-minute banter?
All right, let's just get right into it. I think we need all the time.
What is so important? What's so important?
All right, so Britney Spears finally got her day in court and was allowed to speak candidly to the judge about her conservatorship. Right, so the story goes that on Tuesday, June 22nd, the New York Times had obtained these court documents that proved that Britney had been asking the courts to end the conservatorship for a bunch of years, and writes this really scathing article against this mainstream recognition that she's sick or unwell. And then the next day, on that Wednesday, her speech validated everything to the hashtag Free Britney campaign. Basically, all they've been saying is correct. If you haven't listened to the audio for this, you honestly really have to. The way that she spoke was honestly coherent and thoughtful, and with poise, and I think it eliminates, in my opinion, any suspicion that maybe she's unwell. It was just too coherent. Here's some of the main points of the speech for those of you who aren't going to actually listen. So basically, she's been held prisoner for 13 years against her will. Her family and the conservatorship has been keeping her hostage, claiming that she's unwell or has dementia. But somehow she's still able to do work, do tours, long hours, make money, and supports dozens of people who work for her and the conservatorship. Now, these managers of that conservatorship, including her dad, are making crazy amounts of money. She's extorted into ridiculously expensive treatments like a $60,000 per month rehab clinic. She's not allowed to access any of her money at all. She has a IUD, or a birth control device, implanted in her that she doesn't want, and she's restricted from getting married or having kids or having relationships, frankly. She's drugged as a retaliation. So she talked about this one specific time where she was doing practice and she didn't want to do a particular dance move in her set, and that disagreement led her to be put on lithium for months.
Lithium.
Lithium
is a hardcore drug.
It's fucking crazy, and if you take it for too long, you literally can lose your mind.
It's a helpful drug for people who have
for short-term treatments, and for people who have serious mental illness. Yeah, it's useful, but they were literally drugging her in retaliation for with lithium, which is nuts. And I think the worst part about all this is that she's not able to hire her own attorney. She was appointed one by her conservatorship, which is a fucking that should be wrong. The conservatorship is the one that wants to keep her in the conservatorship, so they appoint her an attorney that's not going to be very fucking good at getting her out of it, So she wants her life back, she wants her money back, and she said several times that she wants this conservatorship to end. And, at the end of her speech, her attorney, who was appointed to her, still said that his client, Britney, had never asked to end the conservatorship, so, I don't know, somebody's lying here. And he says that ending it isn't a good idea. And what's super scary about all of this, honestly, is that after that call ended, she just went back into that situation, into that abusive situation. So I can only imagine, the type of drugs or, retaliation that she's going to have to endure by coming clean about this. It's an abusive situation. It's honestly a crime, and all of these people are fucking corrupt.
So Rose McCowan, I guess she contacted the Tucker Carlson show, and she was like, "Hey, I have a very important announcement I have to make. I need to get on this show." So the producers were like, "Okay, yeah, come on," and they changed the show. They changed the segment, restructured the show, and that's what she was talking about. She was talking about
the Free Britney.
Yeah, the Free Britney movement. And it's interesting because if you look back at that documentary that came out on HBO,
yeah, we talked
Netflix,
something like that. I forget.
Whatever,
it might have been Hulu.
Hulu, whatever. They're listening to her talk when she was younger. She had her random, moments that seemed pretty crazy, like when she shaved her head. But it's understandable in the context of being harassed.
Exactly.
And being followed and being portrayed as some, train wreck by the media 24/7.
Right.
But when you hear her talk when she's like 19, 20 years old, she seems completely normal. Like she doesn't. There's no like hint of any type of mental problem. There's not even like a crazy twinkle in in her eye. You know that you get like.
Yep. You can like kind of tell sometimes with some people. Yeah. Honestly, nothing has changed. Crazy. Nothing has changed. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, like go, like Google it, listen to the actual tapes. I think the worst thing she did in that entire thing was drop one F-bomb, and it was tasteful in my opinion. But like she was super coherent the entire time, and she was making some valid points, and it was honestly really fucking sad. And like I know, like I already believed the hashtag Free Britney, movement. I guess because at that point it was kind of a he said, she said, and she hadn't herself come out and said all these things. But the fact that she has at this point basically removes any, idea that it's a quote conspiracy. Like now it's like out, and even the New York Times obtaining those documents saying that she's been trying to end this thing forever, adds some credibility to that claim. So, it's a very sad situation.
Man, that is creepy. The fact that they have an IUD to prevent as birth control. Now that is just very, very weird and very.
It's crazy. Very intrusive. It's very intrusive.
Incredibly intrusive. Like a total violation of one's own
like human rights. Like this is nuts.
Like she's being treated like an animal, like cattle.
Right. And, the crazy part about it, I talk to my girlfriend about this a lot because she's like real big into it. She's what got me into it. And, the thing that we always come to and the thing that she says a lot is like, there are plenty of people who have mental illness, who have all of their liberties, like plenty, like millions of people who have like severe mental illness that still have their liberties. And for whatever reason, even if you wanted to say she has a mental illness, there should be no reason why we are like so severely removing all of her liberty, all of it. There's no good reason,
That's a good point. There's no and here's what I've seen on the internet, people who are like boo hoo, she's makes she's worth $200 million. I don't know how much
she can't touch any of it.
I have no idea how much money Britney Spears is worth. I'm assuming a lot of money. But they're like, boo-hoo, why should I give a shit about some, teen pop star who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars? I'm like, well, this is like a precedent, like of someone being taken hostage, basically, and kind of used as a.
It's like a slavery. It's like
a slave labor.
It is literally slave labor because, first of all, she can't touch any of her money, right? So, yeah, she's worth hundreds of millions of dollars probably, and she can't touch a damn penny of it, right? Like, she has to ask if she can get a Starbucks, like, fucking coffee. Like, she doesn't have access to her credit cards or her debit card or anything. She doesn't have access to any of that stuff. And so she can't touch any of her money, so there goes your boo-hoo, out the window. And then the second thing is, that it's literally slave labor. Like they force her to do tours. They force her to like play Vegas shows. They force her to like, make music, and apparently she's well enough to make all of the people in the conservatorship rich, but she's not well enough to take care of her own self or to have any kind of liberty. It's the height of hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Well, let's move on to the actual topic, the actual show. And this,
thank you for humoring me on that.
Past, I think that deserved a rant, right?
Yeah, I think so. So we talked about this on the show a couple times already, and I needed to get that out.
Yeah, we need to have an epilogue to some of the other episodes we've done. But I mean, it's been a crazy week, crazy month for news in terms of like the stuff that we usually talk about. For one, recently, Russia just fired warning shots at a British Royal Navy destroyer sailing through Crimea. So that's one thing we could talk about. Then the Taliban is pretty much gobbling up Afghanistan at lightning speed. Right now they control like 42% of the country, and they're surprised how fast the Afghan government is crumbling. So there's that. We have John McAfee, Was he suicided or was he not suicided?
I don't know. He had a whole lot of synthetic cocaine.
I mean, he did say that if he died, he didn't kill himself. It wasn't me.
Yeah.
So I guess it does at the very least deserve like
raise some questions.
Well, let's see. Did he do it? Did he do it? He said wasn't going to kill himself. People are like, well, he did that on purpose to make it a bigger deal when he did kill himself. I don't know. I mean, John McAfee is nuts.
Right. Not to get back to Brittany, but I'm actually very worried that she might try to suicide herself. Gets suicided, I should say.
If that
because
happens,
honestly, these people could go to jail. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the people running the conservatorship could straight up go to jail.
If that happens, I mean, I feel like that's going to open up like a whole can of worms where people are going to be like, let's review every single person famous person who committed suicide, and let's review who hated them and what was the motive behind it. Like, let's go back to Anthony Bourdain. I know there's conspiracies about him and stuff like that. But all right, we'll go way too off topic.
Yeah, sorry.
Then there's Iran's. They have a new president. Ibrahim Raisi. And then there's even the new Israeli government with Naftali Bennett we could talk about as prime minister. But we're not going to talk about any of that today.
Nope.
Because you, my friend, have this very, I don't want to say unhealthy obsession, but you have a strong curiosity with aliens.
That's right.
And we've been talking about doing a show on aliens pretty much when we started the podcast. And, this is, I guess, stems from what your love for the show Ancient Aliens and UFO theories and lizard people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like the lizard people theory more. I gravitate towards that more. I think there might be more validity to that. I think there's already proven, or maybe it's the same. If you ever watched the movie V, it's an old I think 1970s TV miniseries called V for Victory. Mm-hmm. It's about these aliens that travel to Earth, and they take the form of human beings. So all the aliens are actors, not American, but they're human actors, of course. But they are actually lizard people in disguise, and they're aliens, and they basically have taken control and set up like Earth as a global colony. And then you have the resistance and stuff like that, and the collaborators. Interesting movie. Interesting miniseries.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. But now we have good reason to talk about it because the U.S. government, I guess, dropped the report on UAPs. Is that that's what they're calling it in the report? Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, right?
That's correct.
And they dropped that yesterday. So we're recording this on Saturday, the 27th, I think, or 26th. Not really 26th. Sure what day it is. 26th. And, we decided to record a little bit later than we usually do. So, we can get our hands on the documents. And,
I got the documents right here, Henry.
And I mean, I'm going to let you lead this because you know far more than I do about this. I am just kind of like a skeptical, like, what? These UFOs, where are we getting at with this? What are you saying? Aliens are here? And then I immediately think of that meme of that guy with the crazy hair who's like, aliens.
Yeah. Giorgio Tsoukalos is his name.
Or I think of the guy from Independence Day.
Which one?
The drunk guy who
redeems
himself at the end.
Yeah.
Who's
the pilot?
Like kids. Yeah, the pilot whose kids are like disappointed in him, and then he smashes his ship as like a last act of revenge against the aliens that abducted him.
Yeah, that's such.
He's like, I'm back. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, totally.
And then the son's finally proud of him. He's like, that's my dad.
He's dead now, but that's my dad.
That's my dad. Because he's disappointed.
I think that might have been Jack Black. No. I'm thinking of Mars Attacks.
It was a guy who plays Uncle Eddie or Uncle Earl in the Vacation movies.
Right.
I forget his.
Yeah, you're right.
I forget Uncle Earl. Whatever. Shitter's full. That guy. Shitter's full. Yeah. Tell us about it. What's going on? What are these UFOs? What the fuck's going on?
Okay. All right. So you remember that episode that we did a while back where we reviewed the coronavirus relief package and we talked like at length about where all that money was going?
Yes.
So what were like some of the funny things that we were talking about there? It was like, $1 million or something like that to like Pakistani like women's studies or something like that, and like, I don't know, just like these random programs were all getting all that money. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but all these stimulus bills, they've all had just crazy shit tucked inside that warranted their own bills at the very least.
Right.
money to different schools and colleges, and there was like an Amtrak. This wasn't that stimulus. I think it was a stimulus under Trump. Back, I think the April stimulus or March, the one in the summer of last year. There was like this Amtrak, like billions of dollars in it for Amtrak tucked in there, and then there were just a lot of things that had nothing to do with like corona relief. They were like. But yeah, they tuck in a lot of Congress critters. They try to tuck in as much as many things in these bills as possible.
Well, that's exactly the point that I want to make here, because one of the crazy things that they stuck in one of these bills is what we're going to talk about today. So back in December 2020, Congress passed that $2.3 billion omnibus spending and coronavirus relief package. And obviously it wasn't as big as the first one, but the interesting piece of language ended up in some commentary that was attached to the bill that got signed into law. And not a lot of people noticed it until like very recently, because there have been a crazy news flurries about it coming out. And basically what it was that there was a stipulation in it that was requiring the Department of Defense and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to deliver an unclassified report on UFOs to Congress within 6 months. And so it basically said that the report had to include a, quote, detailed analysis of the unidentified aerial phenomenon data and intelligence that was collected by the Office of the Naval Intelligence, the FBI, and the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, among many others. So
there's something called the UAP Task Force?
Yeah, so it's the UAPT, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, and that's the program that the Department of Defense created last summer to basically like set up, detection, analyzation, and like cataloging of all these sightings and reports to figure out if any of this poses a threat on national
and they're not
security.
It's not a bunch of nutters who are
No,
no. Oh man, aliens are coming. They're not like.
We're talking about like fighter pilots that happen to notice something that looks off on a radar, and then like a radar operator will see something crazy and they set up like structures on how do we report on it, what information do you have to give, and like where does it go, and like how does it classify, things like that. So
it's not Men in Black.
No. Okay. No. It's just data collection. And then the other thing that you pointed this out, UAPs, so unidentified aerial phenomena, is the new like fancy term that the government is using to just basically describe UFOs. Now, for the remainder of this podcast, I'm just going to say UFO because I like it better. But what the important part about it is that they changed the word object in UFO, unidentified flying object, to phenomenon, which basically allows them to lump in things like technical glitches of radar or like targeting systems or like strange weather shit, alongside physical things like maybe secret weapons technology or aliens, so they're able to, UAP is a bit of a broader term, right? So it's it allows for more things under its umbrella. That makes sense?
Well, I think that makes sense, but that also sounds appropriate because a lot of the... Didn't they discover that a lot of the things that they think are objects are just like weird weather patterns or,
Let's get to the report first before you make any assumptions on it.
All right. All right. Yeah, I'm totally speaking in assumptions. So, I come with practically no knowledge. But why did Congress ask for this bill exactly?
So, this is pretty interesting. Let's actually read the act. It's short, I promise. It was actually put together by Marco Rubio, who at the time was the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and
He's
actually
from
for
another
once,
planet.
he's probably one of the aliens. So for once, I actually agree with Marco Rubio on something, which makes me feel a little weird. But we're like almost totally aligned on this particular issue. So the particular commentary is called the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, and it's fucking boring, and I read it all. But there's like just a subsection in there that specifically talks about this, and it's so it starts off saying, the committee supports the efforts of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force at the Office of the Naval Intelligence to standardize collection and reporting on unidentified aerial phenomenon, any links they have to adversarial foreign governments, and the threat they pose to the U.S. military assets and installations. However, the committee remains concerned that, and this is the important part, that there is no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government for collecting and analyzing intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomenon, despite the potential threat. The committee understands that the relevant intelligence may be sensitive. Nevertheless, the committee finds that the information sharing and coordination across the intelligence community has been inconsistent, and this issue has lacked attention from senior leaders. Okay, so let me stop there for a second. Aliens aside, I think this is the real issue here that has like normies like Marco Rubio and people like him worried. And honestly, they're totally right. Like the fact that I should say, if in fact there are physical things flying around our airspace with impunity, like without us being able to detect them in most cases or stop them at all, I think we should at least want to understand what it is. And I think that's a totally reasonable like concern. And that's what people like Marco Rubio were gearing this whole request for. And it's troubling because between our government's policy of like absolute secrecy on UFOs and, politicians like, I don't know, inability to not like crack a smile or get like hyper judgy when the topic of UFOs comes up, I think there's a serious chance for us to get caught with like our pants down here, Like what if these things are hostile in any way and we just refused to pay attention to it because it's UFOs are stupid, like that's not real, go back to ancient aliens, like it's just
I kind of have that attitude, to be completely honest. It sounds like let's just fucking say that Russia has some advanced super jet that they have technology that they somehow developed that surpasses our own, and we need to, make another $1.5 trillion plane to combat that. You know what I
mean? Yeah. I mean that's we'll get to that in a bit, but yeah, I mean I think that's definitely one of the plans. But I just think that the fact that we don't have like a straightforward plan on how to collect the information, let alone like deal with it, is kind of nuts, right? All right, so let me read on. So it says, therefore, the committee directs the DNI, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense and the heads of such other agencies as the Director and Secretary jointly considered relevant, to submit a report within 180 days of the enactment of the act. It goes on for a little bit, but basically this is the part where it has had everybody all worked up about the report coming out. This is why you probably saw like a million articles about it leading up to Friday. And the bill was enacted on the 28th of December, if I'm remembering correctly, which is 180 days from June 25th. So yesterday, Friday, June 25th was 180 days. So I'm actually personally surprised that they went through with it because, even though they waited like pretty much to the very last minute, like it was a college term paper or something like that.
So I thought it was signed into law that they had to release this report.
I mean, technically they were. I should say technically they weren't bound by law to release anything, because this. What I'm reading here is additional commentary on the bill, not the bill itself. But oftentimes, like government agencies comply with these types of requests in this type of report as if they were law, right? But they certainly don't have to. Which makes me kind of surprised that they actually went through with it. Anyway, so reading about what they were asking for.
So it was more of like a suggestion then rather than like a law.
Well, it was, so again, I think it's common practice in these types of commentaries that these committees will like make requests of government agencies to provide reports and things like that, right? And like while those agencies don't technically have to comply, they just do anyway, you know.
Okay, gotcha. So more of a request than like
than a demand.
Enshrined.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So here's what they asked for. So it says the committee further directs the report to include 1, a detailed analysis of unidentified aerial phenomena data and intelligence reported collected by the head of Office Naval Intelligence, including data and intelligence reporting by the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. By the way, this is super hard to read because it's like very like it's written in Congress. So this is a super important part. 2, a detailed analysis of unidentified phenomena data collected by A, geospatial intelligence, B, signals intelligence, C, human intelligence, and D, measurement and signals intelligence. Okay, so this is a little bit wordy, but this is the part that specifically calls out the fact that there are many methods that we've been collecting data on, and asks for a detailed analysis to include all of the types of data points that we have. So basically, this puts some meat on the bones, right? So I know folks like you might tend to think that, you know, the UFO thing is just like a handful of kooks that saw something outside and maybe they're just smoking crack or something. But this isn't just like a handful of eyewitness reports. It's data that was collected from a number of methods from, honestly, people that are extremely well trained. But it also it's kind of a double-edged sword, though, because it opens up the data to a whole lot more scrutiny, and it gives the intelligence community a bit of an out to delay any concrete findings, because, you know, when you're dealing with things like radar and, you know, other very sophisticated measurement systems, like you're going to want to check to make sure that all the gadgets and gizmos are working like as they intended first, and then afterwards try to explain what they learned, right? Because the first thing they're going to ask is like, well, you know, okay, so you found it on radar. Was the radar broken? When was the last time you serviced the radar? You know, what kind of interference might have the radar encountered in that time? What was the weather like? You know, like they'll have to ask a million questions before they can give you any answers on what they found. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So I guess what I hear other skeptics saying is like, well, you know, a lot of this is just, isn't a lot of this these radars signals intercepted or are discovered by like the U.S. Navy, who has a reason to, you know, put this information out there, like, hey, like there's all this stuff that we have no idea, you know, what it is. Like, don't we need to get a budget to find out what this is, and, you know, make some a tool that can combat it if it's a hostile object or.
Well, yeah, I think you're on to you're basically picking up what is about to be said. So I'll skip ahead a little bit. So number 6 says identification of potential aerospace or other threats by the UAPT to national security, and assessments of whether this unidentified aerial phenomena activity may be attributed to one or more foreign adversaries. So there's that, and then later on. It says recommendations. So this is the last point there. Recommendations regarding increased collection and data, enhanced research and development, and, as you pointed out, additional funding and other resources. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, dude. So basically they're saying, figure out if it's a threat, figure out if it's, you know, Russia. Let's put more money into it. You know, let's spend more money about it, which is hilarious.
You know, so I swear, I remember there was, I think in the 50s and the 60s, there was, the CIA was like covering, they were kind of making, I don't really know the story, so I'm paraphrasing this, and I might be getting this wrong, but the CIA was kind of letting this UFO information get out there because they didn't want people to know about their own technology, like their own spy planes. So they're like, we don't want to actually disclose or declassify that we have these planes, like the what were the big
U2 or
flights?
the SR-71 Blackbird, things like that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get it.
things like that. So they were like, yeah, well, maybe they are aliens. Well, we don't know what they are. Who knows what they are?
Yeah, it's like
So
a
they were
psyop,
kind of lying
basically. Yeah.
to cover up some of the spying technology that we had.
Totally. And this is actually the last sentence of the thing, and I think it's a total bummer for people like me who are hoping to get like alien disclosure out of this. The last part of it says, the literally last sentence: "This report shall be submitted in unclassified form, woohoo, but may include a classified annex." So I was like, fuck. They're basically going to tell us something, but they're not going to tell us everything. And so I think probably any of the bits that have to do with like, maybe like some special technology that we have will be included in a classified annex that we won't get to see unless, fingers crossed, somebody leaks it. Come on, please. But yeah.
It's interesting. I feel like every single, well, I don't think it was who Trump did this, but I know Obama said he did this. The first, and I think Clinton did it too. It's usually the Democrats who are more interested in this for some reason. It might be, well, we can just kind of speculate what the reasons are, but Obama said, one of the first things I did when I got into the White House, I said, hey, where do you keep the aliens?
Right. Can I get a tour?
Can I get a tour? Yeah. Can you show me the secret aliens? And
right.
then,
and they told him no.
Like, well, I didn't get anything, but, there are things on radar systems that we just can't explain. Right. Folks. Right. I think Clinton did the same thing. I think Clinton was real into it as well. I think Trump didn't give a shit.
Literally every president since I think it was every president since Obama minimum has shown an open interest, but definitely also Clinton and maybe George Bush. I didn't find any specific ones on him asking about the aliens, but he was kind of a dumbass, so
no curiosity. So something I've heard. So I was listening to. I sent this podcast over to you by Radio War Nerd.
Yeah,
and they did a podcast. Radio War Nerd is a really good podcast that does the same type of subjects that we do. I would encourage you to listen to that one. But they did one on UFO and Pentagon and stuff like that, and they were saying that there's kind of two classes in the. This is kind of like an oversimplification of what they were saying, but the more Republican-aligned generals or people in the Pentagon are less likely to, care about this UFO stuff or thinking about aliens because they were saying it's like a rejection, kind of undercuts maybe their religious views,
right,
and things like that. And then the more the Democrats or the ones more aligned with the liberal Democrat Party are more inclined to be interested in that stuff. But a guy who I know who's really instrumental in Washington, who's like a really big UFO nerd, is John Podesta. John Podesta is a super big nerd when it comes to like UFO stuff, and I know he pushes really hard for it. I mean, maybe he is an alien, you know what I mean? I certainly would believe it if you're like, hey, this is one of the lizard people from V. I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Well, that kind of lines up with the whole Pizzagate thing too. So.
Yeah. But I know he had like an X-Files themed like 50th birthday.
Really?
Or he had an X-Files themed birthday. I'm not sure. I think it was his 50th. I'm not sure exactly.
You know who else was really big into it? Harry Reid, and
Harry Reid.
Not like a nerd, but like he definitely created AATIP, which is the advanced what is it called? Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, which had been running from like since 2008 or something like that till like very recently when they shut it down. That was another one of those like programs that we weren't privy to, that we were spending mad money on.
Well, another thing that they were saying on this podcast, and man, the guest they had on was real smart. Man, I forget his name. He writes for, I think, the New Yorker. Is Matt something? I'll think of it before the end of this podcast, or I'll pull it up. But they were talking about how the CIA was like leaking information to like people that like back in like the 60s, they were like leaking information to people who they wanted to like make go crazy, like people they knew that would kind of be like stimulated by this, so they can kind of discredit
them. They would go down the like rabbit hole about it. and go nuts.
So they would like literally like be like, oh, this guy's kind of into this stuff. He's kind of crazy. Let's fuck with him and like leak some shit out to him, and maybe he'll kill himself.
Right.
They were talking about that type of stuff. It's called Listen to Radio War Nerd. It's a very good show. I'll try to find a title of that and put it in before we end this episode. All right, but let's go back. But so the report, it comes out. It didn't say anything about aliens or flying saucers. So I guess why is this war? Why does this warrant any attention?
Okay, so the report did drop, and yeah, spoiler alert, there wasn't anything about aliens, but it did say some very interesting stuff that I think has major implications. I just think it was written in such a way that the importance of what has been directly stated by the U.S. government can get lost on a lot of people. So for some context, this report is 9 pages total, and the last 2 pages are just appendixes that like define some terms and like restate the request. I'm glad it was only 7 pages, actually, because I stayed up super late in front of my computer on a Friday, like a total nerd for you guys, just putting together the notes for the show. And, if it had been like 300 pages, I think I might have lost my mind. It would have been nuts. We're not going to read the whole damn thing, the whole 9 pages, though. It would take too long. So the main takeaways of the report, basically, it starts out talking about the report itself. So it was like, how it was put together, what its goals were, what agencies were involved. And the main one that you want to know about is that UAPTF, which we talked about, right? The UFO hunters.
Agent Scully and Mulder.
Yeah, basically, right. But the report actually draws on data from like 19 different agencies. I literally counted them. So you have things like your favorite acronyms like FBI, NSA, DARPA, FAA. You also get like military branches, Air Force, Navy, Army, etc. And also some new ones that I just learned about recently, like the ODNI or the NIM, Emerging and Disruptive Technology. I have no idea what the fuck it is. Apparently it's an agency that like looks at technology. So they're getting it from a bunch of like different places and from a lot of fancy pants big brain people, and obviously there's a bunch of challenges in collecting UFO data. Catching them is super hard. So the report talks about how while they do use a lot of sensors, and the sensors that they use to gather this data are generally really good, they're not perfect. That there was also like a limited number of high quality reporting on UFOs. And I'm not talking about like grainy footage from a targeting camera. I'm talking about like for the fact that for a long time there weren't like standards on how to report UFO sightings in the military. I think that part is probably technically correct. Like the exact standards were not in place. But honestly, there have been reports on UFOs from highly trained airmen and radar operators for like decades and decades. Even before this like report starts looking at the data. But basically the report says, hey, we started looking at reports from 2004 to today because apparently the data was better. And I personally think that this is a sneaky way not to give us the goods about like Roswell or like Area 51 and shit. But I'll hold the conspiracies to the end of the show. What's very stunning, and I think this is the thing that you're probably trying to get me to get at, is the
let me stop you real quick before you read this.
Okay.
Whatever happened to the storm the alien thing in Area 51?
Oh yeah, we're gonna Naruto run. Yeah, it never happened. Well, I mean, it happened, but like nothing happened. Like
they realized
they had like a million people.
They went to the Capitol instead. They decided to stage it there.
Yeah, right. Like they
switched plans.
I mean, it tells they
got more into pedophile cults.
Yeah, I guess just that conspiracy community is just bigger and bolder, than the alien conspiracy theory community.
Well, no, it's funny. It's funny going back. I keep on referencing this podcast, but it was really interesting that they were saying that the right-wing conspiracy, because there's like a left-wing conspiracy movement and a right-wing conspiracy movement, just in general terms. I know that's not a totally accurate term. I'm just
painting with a super broad brush, but I get what you're saying.
And the right-wing conspiracy movement went more into like Clinton crime, body count, and like pedophile rings and stuff like that, and
maybe there is some considerable,
but there is
crossover.
truth to that. There's definitely truth.
There's some considerable crossover between left and right wing conspiracies, and honestly, a lot of them cross over in aliens.
That's kind of funny. That's interesting though.
Yeah, a lot of them
I
cross
always
over
do
in aliens.
imagine like the kind of like the crazy left wingers are or like the people who are always abducted by or say they're abducted by aliens will always seem to be like these kind of crazy hippies who wandered off.
Dude,
in
a
the
lot
middle
of like
the woods.
random like very conservative farmers and shit will be like abducted.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And that'll like throw off the loop. The alien thing I think crosses a lot of political boundaries because just aliens are aliens.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I just thought it was an interesting point or an interesting observation. If it may not be true or not,
it's just it's the conclusions that they draw about aliens are different, right?
Yeah.
So like where a right winger might think that alien lizard people are drinking the blood of fucking children to like enhance themselves. The left wingers will think something totally different, but they both agree that aliens are a thing.
I tend to think that they're coming out of the ground like crab people.
Yeah, well, like hollow Earth theories.
People,
yeah.
Crab.
All right, let me get back to this thing because this we're getting way off track.
Like human. Yeah, you ever see the South Park? Crab people people walk like crab, talk like human. At least one person will get that reference.
All right, let's get back to the thing. So this is the crazy admission I think that comes out of this report. It says, and I'm quoting here, most of the UAP reported probably do represent physical objects, given that a majority of UAP were registered across multiple sensors to include radar, infrared, electro-optical, weapon seekers, and visual observation. Why is this important? So this means that it's not like swamp gas or sensor issues. The fact that most of these reports are probably physical things raises some huge questions. Now, it does come with some disclaimers, so to be fair, I'll also read that part. In a limited number of incidents, UAP reportedly appeared to exhibit unusual flight characteristics. These observations could be the result of sensor errors, spoofing, or observer misinterpretation and require additional rigorous analysis. Okay, on the one hand, they admit that there's definitely something to this, that there's something there, but they also admit that there's some weird shit that they need to look into more.
Is this where the Navy pilots come in and are like, yeah, like this thing was doing things that go beyond our knowledge of physics?
Yes, I want to talk about that later though.
Okay.
There's more stuff in this report that I think is super important before we could get to there.
All right. So, does the report actually come to any concrete conclusions about what UFOs are?
Yes, but it sucks. So here's a line. We were able to identify one reported UAP with high confidence. In that case, we identified the object as a large, deflating balloon. The others remain unexplained. Congrats. It took them 6 months to figure out the UFO was a balloon.
So, like a balloon from like a child's birthday party, or like a blimp that's taking pictures of the Super Bowl.
I don't know. They literally they literally did
balloon?
not specify.
It was
They didn't specify. So it could be anything. It could be a weather balloon. It could be fucking kid.
I could totally see a conspiracy where all right, we're gonna take some balloons from Tommy's 4th birthday party, and then we're gonna fly
and throw them in the wind.
Throw them in the wind, and then the Pentagon, and then come up on some radar system, and then that will be brought to Congress. Like, we've found something very troubling,
very
in
unusual
our radar systems, very unusual flight patterns, and the physics involved. We're gonna need an additional funding of $100 billion,
$10 trillion.
Of $10 trillion to upgrade our radar systems to understand what these flight patterns are. Maybe
it was a balloon.
We'll have to make some type of new aircraft that will be able to combat these things, because we don't know where they're from. They could be from our adversaries like China and Russia, or even new adversaries such as Planet Photar. Planet Photar. We have firm conclusions that Planet Photar is they have weapons of mass destruction underneath their dictator's palace. Like,
all right, look, here's the thing. They might not have directly said that, like, hey, okay, there's aliens and shit, but they do make some assumptions about the types of explanations that they might land on if they do more research. And it's actually kind of interesting to see where their head is at for these reports. So here's one part. If and when individual UAP incidents are resolved, they will fall into one of 5 potential explanatory categories. So they go on to describe some categories. So I'll paraphrase them. So the first one is airborne clutter. So they imagine that they're probably going to say some number of these are going to be like birds or balloons, or drones. People's like DJI Phantoms flying around the sky. Or like airborne debris. They made a lot of like hoopla about plastic bags apparently, and how they could like muddle the scene.
It's coming right at us. Plastic bags
are straight. Yeah. Okay. So the second category is natural atmospheric phenomena. So things like, fucking swamp gas, ice crystals, moisture, thermal fluctuations. So like if the temperature dips really hard.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's a move in Final Fantasy, right? Ice crystals, isn't that like a spell? Well, the Russians are developing ice crystals.
Blizzaga.
They're finding a way to make that cost less MP than they normally do. So we're going to have to develop a shell.
A fire spar.
Fire.
Fire spell, Firaga. Okay, there's another one. So, U.S. government or industry development programs. So obviously, this is the bits that we'll never hear about because it's going to be classified. So we're talking about things like classified programs by U.S. entities, like a Lockheed Martin program, or like a new plane, or something random that we have that we can't talk about. They also said, and I quote, "We were unable to confirm, however, that these systems accounted for any of the UAP reports collected." So I'm not sure if that reads as, like, we're unable to confirm or deny that these are that, or if they literally could not confirm that any of them were ours. So I'm not sure which is true about that particular statement. It's written weird. And the last two here, there's foreign adversary systems. So this is the one that's going to get a lot of people, a lot of media attention, especially like, CNN's going to be like,
Russia's got like UFOs and we need to like kill Russia before they kill us.
And then, Fox News is going to be like,
China's got these weapons that are flying all over our, airspace, and we need to be tough on China, and Biden's not tough on China.
Well, right? They're both pretty hawkish on both now. Like I was watching Sean. I think I said the story on the podcast, but Sean Hannity basically took Rachel Maddow's script and read it on air after the Trump Putin summit. Like after they met, and, they agreed to have ambassadors go back to their embassies. Like, oh wow,
right.
What capitulation? It was stunning, yeah. But I get the point. The liberal media seems to concentrates more on Russia, and
Russia.
Conservative media concentrates more on China.
Right.
Even though they both kind of are drum up sable.
This is the one that it's clear that Marco Rubio was trying to get at, right? The foreign adversary systems, and honestly, I think it's totally fair. Literally put politics aside for a moment. I think it's totally fair, to want to understand if this is from an enemy or from a foreign adversary.
Planet Photar, man, I'm telling you.
So this is the last one, and this is the bucket that Planet Photar falls in. Other. I'm actually going to read this one because this one's wild. So it says, although most of the UAP described in our dataset probably remain unidentified due to limited data or challenges to the collection process or analysis, we may require additional scientific knowledge to successfully collect on, analyze, and characterize some of them. We would group such objects in this category pending scientific advances that allow us to better understand them. The UAPTF intends to focus on additional analysis on the small number of cases where a UAP appeared to display unusual flight characteristics or signature management. So, okay, this sounds like nothing, but it's actually a lot of something. First of all, notice in all of the 5 categories, they didn't say anything about aliens, right? So they're lumping in aliens with everything we can't figure out, right? So this is them specifically not saying aliens. It's very carefully worded. But that last sentence, I think, gives it away. I'm going to read it again. The UAPTF intends to focus additional analysis on the small number of cases where a UAP appeared to display unusual flight characteristics or signature management.
So this is where, the focus goes to the pilot saying man, I saw this thing in the air where I don't know what it did, but it wasn't bound by our laws of physics as we know it, right?
Right, totally. And I think while there's no distinct mention of aliens and that UFOs are probably physical things, and yes, the only thing we've been able to strongly identify is a balloon, I think this is worth getting worked up over because, an important point that I still haven't even touched on yet is that the report itself talks about how big a threat these UFOs could be. So first of all, they looked at 144 credible reports that fit their extremely narrow standards since 2004. So if you do the math on that, that's an average of 8.5 credible reports a year over the last 17 years. That's basically a new report every single month that they consider as okay, this is credible and we're going to look into it, right? The majority of them, and that's 80 of them, involved multiple sensors too. So there's a lot going on there. And in big, bold letters, the report states, UAP threaten flight safety and possibly national security. So most of the UFOs that they describe in this have interrupted training missions or military exercises, or have been observed near our military assets that have crazy advanced technology. And obviously there's a bit of a recording bias here because, the UFOs are caught most frequently around military assets that are, because those assets obviously have the capability to catch them, right? So I'm not going to find one, right? Because I don't have a fucking radar targeting system, but an F-16 does, you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of a recording bias there, but the fact that they're often caught around military assets is kind of scary.
So are they, I guess, a threat?
Yeah, the report seems to say so entirely. So we can't exactly shoot them out of the sky, and we don't really know what to do with them. Let me read another quick quote for you. So a handful of UAP appeared to demonstrate advanced technologies. So in 18 incidents described in 21 reports, observers reported unusual UAP movement patterns or flight characteristics. Some UAP appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. And this is that Tic Tac story, that pilot story that we're getting into. So have you had a chance to read up into this much before?
I read
the
it,
show?
but let me hear your. I just kind of know I saw some crazy shit out there flying around, and I wasn't able to explain it. So maybe you can go deeper into it.
I won't spend too much time on this particular bit because I know that there are a million videos, podcasts, articles about this particular thing. But just for the context, some of the facts. This was on November 10th, 2004. There was a radar operator. The dude's name was Kevin Day. And he started seeing these slow-moving objects flying in groups, so 5 to 10, off of San Clemente Island, west of San Diego. And there are major naval assets out there, by the way. So he spotted them at an elevation of 28,000 feet, and they were moving at 138 miles an hour. So they were too high to be birds and too slow to be a conventional aircraft, and they were not flying on a flight path. And later, another crew member who also had a shit ton of experience, I think he had 17 years of experience doing radar for cruisers. He also observed it, but he observed them having ballistic missile characteristics. So they went from 60,000 feet to 50 feet above the ocean without producing any kind of sonic boom or anything like that. They're moving fucking fast, you know? And then basically they thought it was a glitch. Like pretty much everybody.
Wait, can we just go back? So they're
Yeah.
going 60,000 feet. They're moving fast, but they're not like landing.
They're not
at
making
any-
a sonic boom.
They're
Nope,
not
they're
making
just
a
like-
sonic boom.
Right, so they'll
They're not-
drop from 60,000 feet to 50 feet in like half a second or something like that, which is ungodly fast, right?
And just
And they
explain
don't-
what a
they
sonic
don't make any
boom
sound.
is. Just
So
explain
a
what a
son-
sonic boom is. Just put that in like greater context.
Yeah, totally. So there is a speed limit of sound, right? I don't know exactly what the speed is. I'll Google it later. If you exceed the speed of sound, what happens is that the air explodes. That's the easiest way that I can like describe it. Once you pass faster than how fast sound can go, it basically creates an explosion of the air, which is, makes a really loud sound, and that is the sonic boom. If you can drop from 60,000 feet to 50 feet in less than a second, you're definitely exceeding the speed of sound by a lot. Like that's a very far distance to go in a very short period of time, and you would definitely be traveling at a rate of speed that's much, much faster. It's the reason why we don't have Concorde airplanes anymore, because those were supersonic planes, and they created a lot of noise, and people complained about it. Which they're coming back, by the way, which is kind of cool. Anyway, back to the story. So the Tic Tac story. So they were looking at all of this data, and the radar operators, they basically thought, all right, we must be having like a malfunction on the radar system. So they spent the 2 weeks trying to figure out what it was, including like turning off the radar system and turning it back on again, like to recalibrate it, just to make sure it wasn't false positives. But eventually, one day, this commanding officer, like this fucking jet fighter guy, his name is David Fravor. He was out flying on a like training exercise, and he encountered what looked like a Tic Tac, right? So he describes it as like maybe like a 40-foot long white oblong shaped thing, right? That was just kind of hovering there, and he was out with his wingman, and he was like, all right, I'm gonna go in and take a look at it. So he starts diving, and the wingman stays above to get a farther view of it, and the thing just kind of like mirrors what he's doing in a circular pattern, and then fucking disappears, right? And they're like, holy shit, this was crazy. So when they go back, they're like, yo, if you're gonna go fly out there, just like be out on the lookout. So this other pilot, an hour later, his name is Chad Underwood. He's the guy that actually made the recording that everybody's seen. Right? That like video where he gets all excited about the fact that he like caught the UFO on his targeting camera, right? And he's like freaking out, and rightfully so, because like the thing that his commanding officer was saying, sounded like bullshit, and then he goes out there like and finds it, which was pretty nuts. And he actually found it on his infrared targeting system. And so what the footage shows is exactly what the commanding officer Fravor had talked about. It was like a Tic Tac thing, and it was hovering, and it was not it was not showing any kind of exhaust or any signs of propulsion, or any kind of like, it didn't have a cockpit. It didn't have like fuselages. It didn't have any like flight things, like things that we would typically associate with flight. It didn't have any of it. And then suddenly it just makes this like hard left turn, and like accelerates to like a bajillion miles an hour out of the picture immediately, like super fast. And that was nuts. So that's the Tic Tac story. I wanted to understand the physics behind this, because I think the report that just dropped really didn't go into a lot of detail about the physics behind some of these anomalous characteristics of these UFOs. And I think that this is by and large the most important revelation, if you will, associated with this report. So I actually went and found a academic study about the physics of this stuff. I'm not a physicist, so please excuse me for not understanding everything, but I pulled some really interesting stuff for us to talk about, and this will help us kind of set the stage for a broader conversation about what the implications of this report is. So the study was posted to MDPI, which is like an academic journal website, and they've been around for a while. And the study is called "Estimating Flight Characteristics of Anomalous Unidentified Aerial Vehicles." It's by a guy, Kevin Knuth, and he's in the Department of Physics at the University of Albany. And also these guys, Robert Powell and Peter Reale, who are in the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. It's extremely dense and has a lot of math and random shit that I totally didn't understand, but I just got to the good bits. So let me start by reading a quick quote from the beginning, from the executive summary, that I think helps kind of set the stage here. So it says, "These unidentified craft typically exhibit anomalous flight characteristics, such as traveling at extremely high speeds, changing direction, or accelerating at extremely high rates, and hovering motionless for long periods of time. Furthermore, these craft appear to violate the laws of physics in that they do not have flight or control surfaces, any visible means of propulsion, apparently violating Newton's third law, and can operate in multiple media, such as space, so low Earth orbit, air, and water, without apparent hindrance, sonic booms, or heat dumps." So, these very smart people, they did the math, they crunched the numbers, and they're like, hey, there's some weird shit going on here. So we've got these things that are flying around and that could apparently do stuff that seems to be impossible, making them effectively untouchable for us. And they seem to frequently hang out around our military assets. And the fact that they're just hanging out near our military assets is one thing, but sometimes they pose a direct threat to us. So this is from the report that was dropped. There was 11 reports of documented instances in which pilots reported near misses with UFOs, meaning they almost crashed with these UFOs. So even if it isn't hostile, it can be sometimes dangerous when we're just flying around. And all of this is to say that the threat is amplified when you consider the fact that the report admits that we have no idea what the hell these things are. We have no idea. So if you're like Henry, as an example, and you don't want to buy into the alien bits, you don't have to for this to be important. This could easily just be a super advanced Chinese spy weapon or something like that. Like, I can't figure out which is worse yet, aliens or like Xi Jinping. But honestly, it doesn't matter, because the fact that we're basically powerless against these things is kind of concerning.
So, and I guess, yeah, like the standard threat of just like crashing into it it just, that's dangerous in itself. But what do you think the possibility it is? It's just like some of our own stuff that we're just not disclosing to the public. Like, don't you think it's more likely that the United States is going to have some advanced technology up in the air that is like super secret, rather than Russia or China?
That's equally possible, and it could be the case.
And like, a lot of this is just shit. Like, okay, like we kind of need to keep this stuff secret, so we'll give the plebs some information to send them down the wrong track, or like a psyops campaign.
That is entirely possible. I will point to the fact that I read before a little earlier that the report says that they were not able to confirm if it's something of ours. That doesn't mean that it's not, but it is relevant to this particular story, right? So we don't know if it is or it isn't. It could be. But if we're talking about specifically just this Tic Tac story report, I think the implications of it being one of our things are equally crazy, right? And I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit, because I think,
what if it's Elon Musk?
It's
pretty cool. I should shot
what if it's Elon Musk? So, I mean, before I jump into some of these theories and conspiracies and talk specifically about whether or not it could be one of ours, like some of our own technology, I want to point out that this report is asking for more investment and looking for more study on the on the question of UFOs. And I kind of support it for a number of reasons. I think it's also kind of potentially like this is all intentional, right? The way that they've leaked all this information and the way that they set this up could very easily just be an excuse to spend more money on the military, right? It's all totally possible. But, you know, given what we know, I think it's a little nuts. Now, remember that study I was just talking about where, you know, and by the way, I want to make this absolutely clear. We have left the realm of stating the facts as we know them, and we're now entering into the part of the show where I'm going to start talking about some theories and conspiracies and shit like that. So, yeah, full disclosure, what I say from now on could be totally bullshit. But remember how I talked about this MDPI study? Where they talk about the physics and stuff like that. Well, there's a whole bunch more interesting things that I pulled out of it. And the math stuff is all a nightmare, but I was able to find a bunch of really great gems that I think can help us, you know, talk about this. So here's one point. They're talking in this one bit about how these objects are accelerating at a crazy high rate of speed. Take a listen to this. So the power required to accelerate the UAV as a function of time, assuming the UAV is propelled in a conventional way, the required power peaks at a shocking 1,100 gigawatts, which exceeds the total nuclear production of the United States by more than a factor of 10. Let me stop. The power involved to move at the rate of speeds that they've been able to observe is 10 times more power than the entire nuclear power production of the United States.
So I heard some science nerd talking about this, and I might be getting this confused. So he was talking about like these things could possibly travel from Earth to Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri is like our closest is like the closest planet that we know that may have livable conditions like Earth. It can travel there in 44 days, like with this.
Yep.
Which
so
is
like
kind of stunning.
It's incredibly stunning because that happens to be like light years away, right? Meaning it takes light several years to travel that fast. And if you take into effect, like if you did the math on it, if it accelerated at that rate constantly in space, it would make it to Alpha Centauri in 44 days. And here's a good analogy. Cars, right? So a Toyota, Prius, as an example, isn't a very, powerful car, meaning it doesn't require a ton of like gasoline to power it. And, the type of engine is super small and the energy that engine outputs is low as compared to, say, I don't know, a Ferrari, right? So in the Prius example, there's a small amount of energy that we need to get the car to move as fast as it can go, which isn't very fast. And in the Ferrari example, we need more energy for that car, a bigger engine, more gasoline, etc., higher octane fuel for that car to travel much faster than the Prius. So now scale this up on like an order of magnitude more. The science, the math behind the amount of energy that it would take for this thing to move as fast as it does, or as fast as it appears to go, is more than 10 times all of the nuclear power that the United States produces. That is an unfathomable amount of energy. For some context, I'm going to give you another part of the quote there. For comparison, the largest nuclear power plant in the United States, the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station in Arizona, provides about 3.3 gigawatts of power for about 4 million people. So we're talking about 1,100 gigawatts versus 3.3 gigawatts for one station. Scale that up, right? We're talking about, hundreds times more people that we could power with this kind of energy. And that device was able to, whatever it is, was able to generate enough energy to make it go that fast in an instant. So either, this is the scandal here, either that thing generated more power than the entirety of the US nuclear production immediately, or this thing has a propulsion system that allows it to bypass physics. Like, physics, don't need it, right? Either explanation is crazy.
Well, so if let's just say if we invented a device with our own, within our own realm of the law of physics that traveled at the speed of light. Now, isn't Alpha Centaurium? Isn't it like what? How many light? Do you have an idea how many light years away it is? It's a lot, like thousands of light years away, right?
No, it's not that far.
Okay.
It's 4.367 light years away.
Okay.
Meaning if you traveled at the speed of light, it would take you 4 years to get there.
Okay. So
and the speed of light is incredibly fast. Like way faster than anything we've ever been able to achieve.
Well, I think I heard something where if we travel to Alpha Centaurium, with our current technology right now, it would take thousands of years to get there?
Yeah, so the fastest speed in space, and I'm just Googling this right now, I believe was our moon missions. And the vehicle reached, okay, I Googled it. So the Apollo 10, that was in 1969. The cruise vehicle reached a speed of 24,791 miles per hour. So 24,791. And the speed of light is in miles per hour. That's meters per second. In miles per hour, the speed of light is a number that you can't even display. It's it's 10 times 6.7, 10 to the 6.7 miles per hour. Ungodly fast, right? It's actually easier to figure out in a meters per second. So meters per second is also a number that's ridiculously fast.
Because with our current technology, we would require colony ships to make it there.
Right. We'd have to basically sleep in hibernation or, something like that, because we've only ever been able to achieve a minimal fraction of the speed of light, right? So if the speed of light is 1, we probably hit maximum 2% the speed of light, 3% the speed of light. That's how fast we're able to go. So if it takes us if it takes light 4 years to get to, to Alpha Centauri, it would take us, I'm really bad at math on the fly here, a lot longer. Let's just put it that way. A lot fucking longer. It would take us 400 times longer, basically.
It's you ever hear of the concept of a colony ship? I think it's a pretty interesting concept, where basically in Wall-E, right? That's the reference I can have.
Right.
Wall-E ship, where humans
Wall-E.
turn into fat whale creatures, and all they do is live on the internet until they reach their planetary destination. But I guess the concept is that it'd be generations and generations of people that would be, living there, and it would be over 1,000 years or so, and then they would eventually, the final generation would be the generation that would repopulate whatever planet they land on. But I would assume that there would be some type of war in that ship where everyone would be massacred before it gets there.
Yeah, I mean, if they were awake, right? So another option is they're just asleep, or that we just send embryos and robots, right? So maybe we send some embryos that are chilling on ice for, a long time, and then the robots will incubate those babies, and then they'll, raise the babies and then eventually get there. There's actually an interesting HBO Max show that's called something about wolves, Raised by Wolves or some shit like that. That's pretty much exactly that concept. Interesting show. You should watch it if you have HBO Max. Okay, but I want to get back to this thing though, because I feel like this is getting lost on you. There are immense geopolitical implications of the idea that this thing can potentially either create a ridiculous amount of energy or ignore physics, right? And so I want to focus on the energy part for a second here. You asked, what if this is one of our stuff? What if this is our technology? Well, so my question is, how long have we had it? Because if we've had it even for any substantial amount of time, I'm talking 5, 10 years or anything longer than that, especially, what we're saying effectively is we've had the capability to produce an immense amount of energy, more than 10 times the output of all of our nuclear power. For how long? We've been fighting wars all over the Middle East related to, at least in part to oil. And we've been destroying our planet, with fossil fuels and carbon emissions. And we've been fucking around trying to make solar panels and windmills and shit to try and plug the gaps. For how long now? When we've just been sitting on this technology that could have just immediately fixed all of those problems. Think about all the people who have died. Think about the nations that we've literally destroyed over energy.
Well, think about all the other places in the world that you can empower with this energy, right?
Exactly. Literally,
you can empower pretty much the entire third world with a unlimited supply of energy like this.
Forget the third world; the entire world could be
the entire
empowered
world.
But
you could potentially bring up a lot.
We could lift people out of poverty immediately.
Yeah, we could lift countries out of poverty with this.
It's almost easier to say it's aliens because, if it is ours, the implications are fucking crazy. And, if it's ours, there's also big money interests. I mean, what bigger money interests than energy and, by an extension, the war industry that would prevent any crazy disruptive technology like this from coming out, right? If I'm fucking Exxon, I don't want this to come out because then I'm going to lose my entire business model. Every car and boat and airplane manufacturer, every manufacturer of any kind of transportation vehicle, that's all obsolete if this is real. Every industry, it disrupts so many industries. We're talking about tens of trillions of dollars of economic activity that would literally be useless if we actually have this technology. How about military, right? So if we had this technology, we could literally wipe China and Russia off the face of the planet because we'd be able to get there in an instant, drop any nuclear weapons that we want, and immediately disappear without them ever even touching us. Like S-400 anti-air system, not even going to come close, right? Won't be able to touch us. There are major implications. And the fact that this report says they are credible reports, they are probably physical objects, most likely physical objects. We have no idea what they are, and they seem to be exhibiting characteristics that defy physics.
So isn't this what that guy... did you mention him? Was Lou
Elizondo? Mm-hmm.
Lou Elizondo, yeah, he's the guy on
right.
the New York Post who's
he's everywhere
going on
now.
all the spokesman for this stuff, right?
So Lou Elizondo, I was going to talk about him, but the report dropped and I stopped doing notes on him. But I can give you a basic, overview of him. So Lou Elizondo was evidently the Pentagon seems to dislike this man, but go figure. Lou Elizondo, he was allegedly the director of ATIP, so the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the one that Harry Reid created. And Harry Reid created it in 2008, and then he took over the program in 2010. And from 2010 to 2017, he was the guy that was responsible for collecting all of the data and all of these reports and basically putting it all together. And so we're talking about this report that just dropped recently says they started in 2004 and they ended in 2021. So this guy was responsible for the collection of the data for the majority of this report, and He was a former. He was in the military, obviously. He was like a counterintelligence guy, right? And he was working with like, getting intelligence on like terrorists and shit like that. Like he would do interrogations and like all that kind of crazy stuff. So he had like a very specific set of skills. Like the guy from Taken, like Liam Neeson, kind of badass type of figure. But apparently, the Pentagon says that he had nothing to do with ATIP. Even though plenty of people, including Harry Reid, who signed a document, said, no, yeah, he was a part of it. And, he was the head of it. And that was my program. So I should know, So this guy has been doing this for a long time. And then he decided to leave the program because he felt that the way that the United States government was handling this and keeping the secrets was bad for the American public and was generally bad for human beings. Super fascinating guy. He's been doing 1 million interviews. Like, if you literally Google this particular issue at any point, you're going to come across Louis Elizondo or Lou Elizondo. He also ended up linking up with Tom DeLonge from Blink 182. This guy who's like apparently also like a huge UFO guy. He created like a school basically for UFO studies. And he's linked up with these people, and he's linked up with hundreds of different, former military, active military, Congress people, you name it. Like, this guy's Lou Elizondo is very, very well connected, and he has all the data, and all he really wants to do is help promote disclosure of this information.
Well, here's the thing. Here's my opinion on this, on Lou Elizondo. Because I listened to the interview he did with the New York Post, and I listened to some short ones on like CNN he did. I feel, and here's my gut feeling, so I can't really back this up with.
All right, we're in conspiracy theory land.
Yeah,
so
we're
it's fine.
We're totally in the realm of gut feeling, conspiracy theory, speculation. Right. So. But my gut feeling tells me that this guy still works for the Pentagon, that this guy still is involved in U.S. intelligence, and he wouldn't be allowed on these shows. He wouldn't be allowed to do interviews on CNN or the New York Post or Washington Post or wherever these mainstream outlets if he wasn't.
Say what he's saying.
Yeah, and say what he's saying. I don't think he's actually like a whistleblower. I think he's a disinformation artist. I think he's a charlatan. That's the vibe I got from him on his interviews. I just got a very charlatan type vibe from him.
Listen, here's what I think, and I kind of agree with you in certain respects. I think he definitely might be I don't want to characterize him as a misinformation asset, but more of a controlled information asset, right? I definitely think that there's a lot of truth behind what's going on right now. Specifically because
I think
we've
you're
been
right.
able to.
I think it's control. I think he's putting out the information that
he's putting out the narrative as the U.S. government feels is the appropriate way to put out the information.
Yeah, exactly. But he's making it seem like, oh, this guy's a brave whistleblower and he's coming in conflict.
Right, and I'm struggling against the Pentagon and they don't like us and blah, blah, blah.
Elizondo versus the Pentagon. Maybe some people, I'm sure people at the Pentagon don't like him. There's probably a lot of reasons. And, the Pentagon's not uniform. You always have to remember that these organizations aren't uniform in, like, their thinking. So there's always going to be some opposition internally. So I'm sure there's some conflict in there. But it just sounds like he's putting out the narrative that the government wants to be. They're putting out that narrative that the government wants. Because you see, when there's actual whistleblowers, real whistleblowers that are uncovering government crimes,
they flee.
They end up like pretty much exiled from the country, like Edward Snowden.
Right, they flee. They have to, yeah.
Or they're put in jail, like Julian Assange. All right, this is the third time that we were just cut off due to internet problems. So I think we're going to start wrapping this episode up because obviously the government doesn't want us to release this episode.
We're getting too close to the truth, man. They don't want us to spoil it at all.
It's funny because right when we were calling him, what's his name, a charlatan,
Elizondo,
Elizondo, a charlatan,
exposing him for being a hack.
yeah. Our internet starts to shut down. So what the fuck. But all right, here's where I think how we should end this. So, do you believe in aliens? Like, do you what do you like? What are your thoughts? Like probability? Like, do you think that there's alien visitors or first and foremost, I should ask, like, do you believe that there's intelligent life outside of Earth?
For that question, undoubtedly.
You think
the universe
so,
is way too big for universe is way too big for it to just be us. Just statistically, it feels impossible.
So I agree with that. I do tend to agree with that. The universe is just so big. They're just like, by probability, there has to be a planet that has the same conditions that we have, and there has to be some life form out there.
Oh, I'd even argue that it doesn't even have to have the same conditions. I just think that the universe is so ridiculously large that sentient consciousness, can exist in either a form that we understand, like our life, or in a form that we don't yet understand, like, I don't know, transdimensional or like fucking something else. Who knows? But the point is that it's just way too big for it to just be us, and that's my personal opinion.
So I kind of believe that I believe that too, but I do I think this argument does hold water, that the conditions on Earth are just so perfect that the conditions for life are uniquely it's uniquely unlikely that it could happen at another planet. Like, the odds that life happens at another planet is so unlikely. Do you know what I'm saying right now? I'm probably not describing it in the most
life as
way.
we know it. Life, like our life, maybe,
Yeah.
But, like, again, I want to make the point that, they could be we're carbon-based life forms. What if they're hydrogen-based life forms? Or what if they're, like, helium-based life forms? We don't know. We really just do not know. And I think, as it relates to these UFOs, is it aliens? Maybe. At least the physics behind it seem to suggest that anything that's alive that, couldn't possibly be trapped. I don't know. As we know it, any living thing couldn't possibly be in one of these vehicles, because literally if you accelerated at the rates that these things are going, physics determines that your brain would turn into fucking soup. Like, the G-forces are so incredibly immense. And that's the one part of the NDPI article that I didn't get a chance to read. But I do want to say a few closing things about this. I think it is, all options are on the table. It could be aliens, it could be a foreign adversary, it could be our own technology. It doesn't matter what the answer to that is. What matters is that we've acknowledged, this is a historic precedent, that we've acknowledged that it's real, or at least that that the collection of this data is real, and the physics implications have giant repercussions for potentially for geopolitics, for energy, for for society and culture as we know it, and if it is one of our technologies and we've had it for any amount of time, and Lou Elizondo is just like a hack for the Pentagon, and he's just controlling the narrative in the way that the government thinks is possible. I think if we're doing the slow little drip, slow disclosure, I think that's a feasible argument to make. And, it makes sense because, it would be a crime to withhold this technology from humanity. It literally would be a crime. And so, I want to make this full circle, Henry. We started the episode talking about Brittany, right? And I think that the truth about what we're seeing is very much like Brittany, and it's being held in a conservatorship, and it's not allowed to come out. And people, specifically, the war industry and the Pentagon, but also ancillary things like energy industries and the auto manufacturers, you name it, are all have vested interests in making sure that this doesn't come out, right? That it stays in a conservatorship of the government, if you will, right? And, much like Brittany, we got a hashtag free Brittany, hashtag free the aliens. You know what I mean? Because this is what's going on.
I don't know. I'm still skeptical, Danny. I'm going to be completely honest. I think that
After all that,
I don't know.
you're
I
still
feel like there's
skeptical?
going to be ways to explain all this stuff that just like, oh yeah,
Swamp gas, balloons.
swamp gas, balloons. I think there's more. I'm going to wait to hear what Neil deGrasse Tyson says. All right. I think he's my authority on science. He really is. Neil deGrasse Tyson is like, what does he say
I actually
about
watched
this?
him on Joe. I watched him on Joe Rogan, and he said, "Well, the first thing we should assume is that it's aliens because, first of all, if we're talking about a scientific, scrutiny, if you go to any scientific like convention or conference or you read any scientific paper, like the level of scrutiny that they have about mundane shit, like, if we saw something on a radar, the first thing they're going to say isn't, what is it? The first thing they're going to say is, well, how old is the radar? When was the last time you serviced it? Has it been calibrated? And they're going to nitpick every little fucking detail about the data to where you're not even going to come close to an explanation, let alone aliens. Right. Yeah. So, and Neil deGrasse Tyson is a scientist. And so I totally agree with that. I totally think we should pick it apart. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't say that we should just throw it out. Right. There are so many documented pieces of evidence for this. And the fact that, we're just talking about 2004 to 2021. There is decades of observations, from the Roswell incident through a program called Kelly Blue Book. Excuse me. I knew I was going to do that. It's not Kelly Blue Book. It's just Project Blue Book. Fucking hate it every time I say that. Kelly Blue Book is for cars. Project Blue Book, which ran for, a couple decades, which also had been taking in reports, albeit they didn't have the same kind of sophisticated sensors and data collection that we do now, to Project ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program that Lou Elizondo had headed up before they closed that program down, that wasn't officially acknowledged until very recently, to very recently right now when we're literally setting up a UAPTF. Like there's too much data, there's too much evidence for this to be nothing. There's just too much.
Interesting indeed. And then full circle, I guess it's kind of in the spirit of like the ancient alien argument. It's like, well, all these ancient civilizations couldn't have, built, the Egyptians couldn't build the pyramids and all this stuff, and all these super, old ancient civilizations couldn't have achieved the technological they couldn't have made the technological achievements they made, because, they're 3,000-year-old or 4,000-year-old culture in some cases. Right. Right. So it had to be some assistance with aliens. So I feel like it's kind of like the same argument now. It's like, this technology that we can't explain that, may be able to power the universe or power the world at least. Can only be explained by
by aliens.
Yeah, by aliens, by technology that we can't
and that's
yet. Because otherwise
that's a fair thing. Yeah. Otherwise it's a crime.
Yeah, otherwise then, what is this technology? I don't. Well, I guess
no, dude.
See.
Otherwise,
well,
otherwise it's a crime. Seriously, otherwise it's a crime because if it isn't alien technology that we just like reverse engineered, then it's a fucking crime. We've literally so many people have died, so many people are in poverty, so much our planet is literally dying, and we have had, and you're telling me that we potentially have the solution to this, and we're just not going to talk about it. We're not going to use it.
It's just
it's
like
a crime.
How
it's either aliens or it's a crime.
How would we have created this technology? You know what I mean? That's my thing. I think there's like an explanation to how what this is, and it's not necessarily some like super crazy power source that we've identified or are able to use that we're just not sharing with the rest of the world for
well, if it's not energy, then it's if it's not an energy source, then it's something that ignores physics, which in and of itself is a technology that can be utilized to better humanity, which again, the implications of this could be a crime, right? If you're telling me that we've been shipping fucking, all of our stuff around the world in cars, planes, and buses and ships and shit like that, and we've been polluting the earth with fossil fuels when we could have just had this shit moving all of our things around and moving all of our people around, it's a crime. It's a fucking crime.
Part of me thinks it's more likely that it's alien technology than us being able to pull off holding that a secret. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, part of me
it's certainly easier to think that. Yeah.
Like, it's certainly easier to think that. It's just hard to me to imagine that we have this power source and we're not, and we're that good. The government is that competent in keeping that a secret.
Right.
It's hard for me to fathom that.
Hard to believe.
But I mean, our government keeps many secrets. So who knows? It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly interesting. Should we wrap this up? Wow, sirens!
Yep.
I don't know if you can hear that.
Ooh, that's a something that we haven't heard in like 50 episodes or more.
Yeah, that's interesting. My new recording area. We solved the siren problem, meaning I moved away from not living next to a hospital. That was the solution. But let's end this thing. Or anything else that you want to add before we end this?
No, I've said my piece.
Us down again.
What's that? Let us know if you actually liked. Well, I've said my piece, and for the listeners out there, let us know if you like content like this, because I've been dying to do some alien stuff anyway. So if this was interesting to you, I have so much more to talk about the history of aliens and all these other interesting programs. So let us know if you'd like to hear more about it.
Yeah, if you like this, let us know. Make sure that you rate and review the podcast. That is the number one way to help the show grow. Rate and review the podcast on iTunes if you're listening, and share this with a friend. Share this with, post it on your social media and stuff like that. Get the word out. You can also support us on Patreon for just $1 a month, and we have exclusive content on there, early content. You get access to our Slack. Our Slack is pretty cool because you get to communicate with all of our Patreons and us, and we just have, we post news stories and talk, and it's fun. I really like the Slack community we built. It's an awesome community. We have some awesome people there, and I really enjoy talking to everyone on Slack. Just want to give you guys a heads up. I think we're taking the next week off. That's the week of 4th of July, so that'd be Sunday the 4th. So we're not going to release an episode on July 4th. We're both, I think Danny and I both have a lot of travel this July. So We're trying to figure out how and when to record episodes, because I know Danny, you're going to Puerto Rico for a couple of weeks, right?
I'm going to be in Puerto Rico for 2 weeks. I should have the internet and stuff like that, but we'll see, how all that works out.
Yeah, and I'm traveling. I'm going to be traveling pretty much for the next 2 weeks as well. So we're going to try to figure out a recording schedule. I just want to give fair warning. It might be a little different this upcoming month, but we're going to try our best to get some content out there for the month of July. So just stay tuned. But next week we're taking, we're not going to be releasing an episode. Take some time if you're new to the show to listen to some of our older content. We have a lot of great episodes, and then we will. Anything else to add right there?
Nope. We'll catch you later.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening to another episode. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you soon, or you'll hear from us soon. Peace.
Peace.